Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Shalom, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, greetings of virtue. Welcome to the third International Postgraduate Student Conference INGRACE 2025. Your Excellency, Mrs. Dahliana Hasan, SH, MTex, PhD, Dean of Faculty of Law, Universitas GADJAH MADA. Your Excellency, Mrs. Sriwiyanti Ediono, SH, LLM, HR, PhD, Head of Master in Law of Faculty of Law, Universitas GADJAH MADA.
And welcome all honorable speakers, conveners, guests, and all participants who are here to join us for today's INGRACE 2025.
First and foremost, let us introduce ourselves. My name is Ernesto.
And my name is Sarah.
And we'll be the master of ceremony for this opening of INGRACE 2025.
INGRACE is an international conference organized by the Faculty of Law at Universitas GADJAH MADA, where scholars, researchers, and experts gather to discuss contemporary issues in the field of law.
Our theme for this year's conference is Towards Ecological and Economic Justice in the Era of Transition, the Role of Law in Maintaining Balance.
Before we start, here are a series of agendas for the whole opening event. The first is opening.
For the second agenda, we'll be singing Indonesian National Anthem and Hymn of Universitas GADJAH MADA.
The third agenda is welcoming speech by the organizing committee.
And also, the fourth agenda is welcoming speech by the head of Master in Law program.
The fifth agenda is welcoming speech by the Dean of the Faculty of Law.
The sixth agenda is a cultural performance by Swaga Yugama.
And for the seventh agenda will be the plenary session 1.
For the last agenda will be the closing remarks of plenary 1.
Moving on to our next agenda, we will be singing the Indonesia's national anthem and the hymn of Universitas GADJAH MADA. May all participants please stand up.
Jauh
All participants, please have a seat.
For our third agenda, we will have a welcoming speech by the organizing committee. We would like to welcome Tommy Putra Zamita to the stage. Tommy Putra Zamita, the stage is yours.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning and welcome to the third International Postgraduate Student Conference or INGRACE 2025. Distinguished Dean of Faculty of Law, Dr. Dahliana Hasan, Head of the Master in Law Program, Dr. Sriwiyanti Ediono, and our esteemed plenary speaker, Dr. Srayan Mukherjee from the NUS, and Dr. Mas Ahmad Santosa from CEO of Indonesian Ocean Justice Initiative, and Dewi Sartika, Secretary General of the Agrarian Reform Consortium. Next, Dr. Mahatma Windrawan Inantra from RSPO, Dr. Rimawan Pradiptyo from the Faculty of Economic and Business UGM, and Mirs Iweng Karsiwen, Chair of Kabar Bumi. On behalf of the organizing committee, I'm honored to extend my warm greetings to everyone gathered here today and to those joining us virtually. The organizing committee has worked over the past month to prepare his conference with one goal to mind: to create a meaningful space for academic dialogue where postgraduate students and scholars can share research, connect, and exchange perspective and law and justice. We are humbled by the diversity in demonstrate the pursuit of justice, whether ecological and economical resonance across borders. I would like to express my sincere appreciation to Faculty of Law leadership, our conveners, and especially to organizing committee, members' hard work and teamwork made this event to possible. And the theme for this year is, we can see it, toward to ecological and economic justice in a transitional era. The role of law in maintaining balance remind us that law has unique role to play guiding society through rapid change. I encourage everyone to engage, share, and build connection in this conference. Let this next few days be filled with meaningful conversation, constructive debates, and collaborative spirits. And once again, welcome to INGRACE. May be inspiring, impactful for us all. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
For the next one, we would like to welcome Mrs. Sriwiyanti Ediono, SH LLM HR PhD, as the head of Master in Law program in the Faculty of Law Universitas Gadjah Mada, to give us a welcoming speech. Mrs. Sriwiyanti Ediono, the time is yours.
Shalom, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, Rahayu, salam kebajikan. dan salam sehat buat kita semua. Distinguished Dean of Faculty of Law, Universitas Gadjah Mada, Ibu Dahliana Hasan, respected plenary speaker, Dr. Sroyon Mukherjee, Dr. Mas Ahmad Santosa, Ibu Dewi Kartika, Dr. Mahatma Windrawan Inanta, Dr. Rimawan Pradiptyo, dan Ibu Iweng Karsiwen, fellows, convenors, college, and participants. It is a great pleasure and honor to welcome you to the third International Postgraduate Students Conference organized by Master in Laws Program, Faculty of Law, University Gadjah Mada. INGRACE become an initiative to give postgraduate students as a platform to share their works and perspective within a global scholarly community. This is the third conference. The first conference was held in 2020. And after that, after we have the COVID pandemic, we have the second conference in 2023. And now this is the third conference as it has grown into a biennial international conference that connect emerging researchers, experienced scholars, and practitioners from across disciplines. This year's theme, toward ecological and economic justice in transitional era, the rule of law in maintaining balance, could not be more relevant. We are living in the period of rapid transformations and environmental crisis, digital disruptions, and economic restructuring are reshaping how society functions. These transitions bring opportunity, but also inequalities. We face many legal challenges. The gap of law is huge. Social economy development and obstacle is greater, which our law is not yet responsible and responsive to this challenge, the problematic legal enforcement, and then there is the deep inequality everywhere, the rise of the poor, the exclusion of society because of their gender identity, disability, and also customary law and also ethnicity. Law, therefore, has a dual responsibility to regulate change and at the same time to ensure justice and inclusivity amid the change. Ecological and economic justice are not separate struggles. Environmental degradations and economic inequality often reinforce one another. When we discuss climate justice, we also discussing distributional justice, who bear the cost, who receive the benefit, and who get left behind. Through this conference, we invite all of you, postgraduate students, young scholars, researchers, to think critically and collaboratively about how legal systems can, contribute to these problems, to solve these problems. I would like to express much gratitude to our distinguished speakers for joining us, our panelists, all of you, and then to the faculty's leadership for continuously guidance us and support us. Thank you, Budin. Finally, to our participants, thank you for choosing to share your ideas here. I hope this conference will not only broaden your academic perspective, but also reaffirm your belief in law as an instrument for justice, equality, and sustainability. Let us use INGRACE 2025, the third conference of INGRACE, as a reminder that our collective efforts as scholars, educators, and practitioners can contribute to a more just and balanced world. Thank you, and I wish everyone has a productive and enriching conference. Thank you.
Moving on to the next agenda, we would also like to welcome Mrs. Dahliana Hassan, SH MTex, PhD, as the Dean of the Faculty of Law, Universitas Gadjah Mada, to give us a welcoming speech, as well as officially opening the 3rd International Postgraduate Students Conference, INGRACE 2025.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning. Selamat pagi to all of you. I would like to give distinguished plenary speakers a biggest appreciation, especially Dr. Sroyon Mukherjee, Dr. Mas Ahmad Santosa, Ibu Dewi Kartika, Dr. Mahatma Windrawan Inanta, Dr. Rimawan Pradiptyo, and Ibu Iweng Karsiwen. And the honor head of the Master in Law program, Dr. Sriwiyanti Ediono, as well as the Secretary Program, Mas Rangga Aditya Dahlan, PhD, respected conveners, faculty members, participants, and honor guests. Well, this is a great pleasure to stand here and to welcome you to the Faculty of Law Universitas Gadjah Mada in this occasion, in this forum that we call International Postgraduate Students Conference in 2025. And at the transit room, at the back, we've got chit-chat between Prof. Thomas Mas Rangga. Okay? Pak Thomas said that this is a very great and much better international conference postgraduate student at the Faculty of Law compared to the first and the second conference. And then Mas Rangga said that, well, it means that's the AAD seal approved. That's a very great situation at the back of that one. And I'm proud of that one because this year we host participants not only from Indonesia, but also from all of the world and international universities, especially from Sierra Leone, Pakistan, Turkey, Bangladesh, and Malaysia, as well as universities in Hungary, the UK, and the Netherlands. And this diversity reflects how deeply interconnected the question of law, ecology, and economy have become in our global community. That's interdisciplinary approach. And the Faculty of Law holds a long-standing commitment to advance justice, democracy, and sustainability through education and research. For us, the study of law is not only academic, but it is also a moral pursuit rooted in service to humanity. The theme of this year's conference, Toward Ecological and Economic Justice in a Transitional Era, covers one of the defining challenges of our century. We live at the crossroad where development and conservation must coexist, where prosperity must not come at the cost of the people and at the planet. I commend the Master in Law program for continuing this biennial tradition and the organizing committee for their remarkable effort in bringing together such a diverse group of scholars and practitioners. I encourage everyone to use this event as an opportunity not only to share research but also to reflect on how law can respond more effectively to the global crisis of inequality and climate change. With that, I'm officially open the third International Postgraduate Student Conference in 2025. And I expect that you have fruitful discussion and collaboration. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Honorable participants, to mark the opening ceremony of the third INGRACE 2025, Swaga Yugama, a student activity unit from Universitas Gadjah Mada, will be performing a traditional dance from Yogyakarta named Tari Retno Asri.
Tari Retno Asri depicts a young woman who began to transition into adulthood by contemplating, arranging, and finding her identity to face the future. This dance also depicts a young woman who hones her knowledge and holds fast to her principle that bring her closer and closer to her dreams and goals. The word Retno means woman and Asri means beautiful. So Retno Asri dance can also be interpreted as a depiction and story of a smart, elegant, and beautiful young woman. Ladies and gentlemen, here is Tari Retno Asri. For the next agenda, we will have a plenary season 1 that will be guided by the moderator, Miss Sartika Intaning Pradani.
Before we start, first we will present the curriculum vitae of Ms. Sartika as the moderator for the next session. Dr. Sartika Intaning Pradani was born in Surabaya on 6 March 1992. She is a lecturer at the Adat or Customary Law Department as a researcher and also a researcher at Jojo Diguno Adat Law Research Center in the Faculty of Law, Universitas Gadjah Mada. Dr. Sartika also completed her doctoral degree in law at Universitas Gadjah Mada, where she also completed her master's and bachelor's degree in law. Dr. Sartika is an expert on adat law and has written numerous scientific journals publications, such as Traditional Rights of Indigenous People in Indonesia, Legal Recognition and Court Interpretation, Relinquishment of Land Rights by Papua Adat Community, Court Decision Study. Also, positivistic approach in adat legal research, and also many other numerous publications.
Miss Sartika, the time and place is yours.
Hello, okay. Good morning. I'm very happy to be here as the moderator of the 3rd International Postgraduate Students Conference, INGRACE, Balancing Justice, Sustaining the Future. I believe that it will be a very interesting and fruitful discussions, especially for the first plenary sessions. We are going to discuss about towards ecological justice, rethinking environmental protections in a transition era. And we have 3 speakers, 2 of them coming offline. So Pak Dr. Mas Ahmad Santoso SHLLM, please come forward, as well as Ibu Dewi Kartika, please also come forward. And the last speaker, Dr. Sroyon Mukhreji, he will be joining online. Is he already in Zoom now? Oh yeah, he is there. Okay. So please, Ibu Kartika and Pak Mas Ahmad Santosa. We are very happy to have Pak Mas Ahmad, Mbak Dewi Kartika, as well as Dr. Sroyon as our speakers. Mas, so it's interesting that in the Javanese traditions, Pak is for like sir, meanwhile Mas is for like brother. So it's very interesting that Pak Ahmad Santoso is, I called him of course sir or Bapak, but he is also Mas or a brother. So I will just call Pak Ahmad maybe, or Pak Santoso, Pak Santosa. Oh, Sundanese. So in Javanese it's Santoso, in Sundanese it's Santosa. So Pak Santosa, and do you mind if I told you Mbak Kartika? Okay. And then Dr. Sroyon Mukhreji, later I will also introduce about him. So before we start, I would like to read the short curriculum vitae of our distinguished speakers. The first, Pak Santosa, he will presenting legal reforms and institutional pathway for ecological justices, focusing on how legal and institutional reform can support environmental protections in this transitional era. And Pak Santoso has long track record as legal reformer in Indonesia, particularly in the areas of anti-corruption, judicial independence, and environmental law and sustainable development, both on land as well as at the sea. It's very interesting. He is also currently the co-founder and CEO of the Indonesia Oceans Justice Initiative since 2020. In addition, he is also active as a senior lecturer on environmental law and natural resources law in the Faculty of Law, Universitas Indonesia. And then he has also have some publications, include Corporate Environmental Criminal Liability in Indonesia, and then Sustainable Ocean Economy is the Only Way Forward, Blue Paper 16, Organized Crime in the Fisheries Sector. Organized crime in the fisheries sector threatens a sustainable oceans economy, as well as eliminate transnational organized crime in fishing industry, Jakarta. So it's very interesting that we are going to hear how then sustaining the future more or less in the context of the sea or the water with Pak Santoso later. And Mbak Dewi Kartika, her CV, she is an agrarian expert and social activist, widely known for her dedications to fighting for agrarian justice in Indonesia. She is currently served as Secretary General of the Agrarian Reform Consortium, or KPA, for the 2021 to 2025 term. So this year is the last term you are serving as the Secretary General. A grassroots organization focused on advocating for agrarian reform and protecting the rights of communities to agrarian resources. Her involvement in agrarian issues has been ongoing for quite some time, marked by her work at KPA since 2007, where she has been active in policy drafting, assisting communities affected by agrarian conflicts, and public education campaign or agrarian reform. Through her integrated academics and activist experience, Dewi Kartika also became an important representative of a generation of intellectual activists who connect agrarian theory with socio-political praxis. Very interesting. We will hear more about this. And then her participations in various national forums, including the second vice presidential candidate debate for the 2024 and 2019 elections, has contributed substantially to the formulations of ideas and public policy in the agrarian sector. Thus, Dewi Kartika's work not only has implications for strengthening the agrarian reform movement in Indonesia, but also enriches academic discourse and policy on agrarian justice as the foundations for inclusive and sustainable national development. So it's interesting that we have scholars with the focus of fisheries and water, and then we have also scholars with the focus on land law. And the last one, our speakers who joining us online, Dr. Sroyon Mukhreji. Am I spelling your name correctly? I hope so. And I will read his CV. So Dr. Sroyon Mukhreji currently serves as Association Fellow, formerly Postdoctoral Fellow at the Asia Pacific Center for Environmental Law, National University of Singapore. He earned his PhD from the London School of Economics with a dissertation focusing on economical valuations in the courtroom, and was a visiting researcher at UC Berkeley and the University of Copenhagen during his doctoral studies. He holds an LLM from London School of Economics with distinction and received the Blackstone Chambers Prize for past performance in international law. And then for his professional career, he worked as trainee solicitors and associate at Clifford Hans LLP London, and undertook a judicial clerkship with one of the justices of the Supreme Court of India. He was also a research assistant at the Grantham Research Institute on Climate Change and guest lecturer at NUGS Kolkata in the field of law and economics. Additionally, he served as assistant editors for Transitional Environmental Law and co-editor of the book Environmental Courts and Tribunals, published by April in 2025. His work has been published in various journals such as Journal of Environmental Law, Rachel, and NUGS Law Review, with some of them even cited by the Supreme Court of India. So maybe what he has done also bring influence towards how the law is working in the courtroom. So it's very interesting that we have three scholars with different academic field. So I believe that we will have a very rich discussions for the first plenary sessions towards the ecological justice, rethinking environmental protections in transitions era. And we have time from 10:46 right now until 12 in the afternoon. So I will give for each of the speakers to speak for maximum 15 minutes. Therefore, we will have much time for our discussions. 15 minutes, not 15. Okay, so maximum then 20 minutes. 15 minutes, I will start to remind you it's already 15 minutes. Okay, so please give applause for our three speakers. And for our first speaker, so I will give the opportunity for Pak Santoso to speak about legal reform and institutional pathway for ecological justice, focusing on how legal and institutional reforms can support environmental protections in this transitional era. Time is yours. Yes, sure, please.
Good morning, distinguished professors, colleagues, and students. It's an honor to be with you today at the third International Postgraduate Students Conference here at GADJAH Mada University Faculty of Law. Allow me first to convey my respect and appreciation to the host of our event, Dr. Dahliana Hassan, Dean of the Faculty of Law, GADJAH Mada University, and Dr. Sriwiyanti Ediono, Head of the Master of Law Program, GADJAH Mada University, whose leadership has continuously advanced critical discussion on law, justice, and sustainability through platforms like this conference. I would also like to extend my warm regard to my fellow speakers, Dr. Sroyon Mukherjee and Ms. Dewi Kartika, is that correct spelling? And to the moderator, Mbak Sartika. It is truly a privilege to share this session with such a brilliant minds whose work continues to deepen our understanding of justice and the environment from both global and local perspective. My topic, can I get permission from the moderator, ecological justice, reshaping environmental law in the Anthropocene epoch. Today, I will discuss ecological justice, reshaping environmental law in the Anthropocene epoch. This presentation invites us to rethink now how environmental law, often fragmented, anthropocentric, cannot respond to the unprecedented Earth planetary challenges of our time. The term Anthropocene was introduced by Crutzen and Sturmer in 2000. They argued that the Holocene epoch had ended and a new epoch had begun, one in which humans have become the dominant geological force on Earth. The Anthropocene is marked by human disruption of the ecosphere. Our activities have altered natural system on a global scale, threatening the survival of humanity, flora, fauna, and ecosystem alike. This reality calls for a profound shift in our legal thinking, a new paradigm that redefines human-nature relationships, moving from human-centered to ecological coexistence. Research by Professor Rockstorm and colleague in 2009 revealed that the Earth has already crossed most of the planetary boundaries. Those thresholds that define the safe operating space for humanity and other living beings. By June 2025, 2 months ago, the United States National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or US NOAA, confirmed that ocean acidification has surpassed the critical planetary boundary. Thus, 7 out of 9 boundaries have now been breached or surpassed. Only aerosols and ozone remain within safe limits. This means we are not only exploiting nature, we are destabilizing the very system that sustains life itself. The Earth Commission, led by scholars such as, again, Professor Johan Rockstorm from Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research, and Professor Fatima Denton, United Nations University Institute for Natural Resources in Africa, reminds us keeping the planet within safe limits is not enough. It must also be just. A safe planet ensures Earth's stability. A just planet ensures that no community, no species, and no generation bears an unfair share of harm. This framework is grounded in 3 dimensions. The first one is interspecies justice, recognizing our interconnectedness with all living beings. The second, intergenerational justice, emphasizing our duty to future generations. And the third, intragenerational justice, ensuring fairness among nations and communities. As Professor Rockstorm reminds us, justice is not optional. It is a prerequisite for a safe planet. To date, the data makes this painfully clear. In 2024, global temperature reached 1.55 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, the highest in 175 years. The UNEP Copenhagen Climate Center's Emission Gap Report 2025 shows that global emission rose by 2.3% in just 1 year, setting yet another record and taking us further from 1.5 degrees Celsius target than ever before. At the national level, Indonesia ranks 163 out of 180 in the Yale Environmental Performance Index across 3 key indicators. The first one is environmental health, the second, ecosystem vitality, and the third, climate change mitigation. This reflects not merely a gap of knowledge, but a failure of transformative action. Climate disasters are now our lived reality. In September 2024, Typhoon Yagi tore through the Philippines, southern China, and northern Vietnam, triggering catastrophic floods and landslides that left more than 300 people died and displaced millions across Southeast Asia. In December 2024, Cyclone Chido ravaged Mayotte and coastal Mozambique, destroying thousands of homes, forcing over 100,000 people to flee. And in June 2024, during the annual Hajj pilgrimage in Mecca, extreme heat reached over 15 degrees Celsius, resulting in at least 1,300 lives, showing how planetary crisis is no longer a distant warning, but a deadly global phenomenon. In our country, Indonesia, according to National Disaster Management Agency, BNPB, climate-related disaster intensified in 2024, revealing the country's deepening vulnerability to climate change. Prolonged droughts from May to September, driven by low rainfall, rising temperature, and the El Nino phenomenon, severely affected agriculture and access to clean water, undermining food security and rural livelihoods. Floods remain the most frequent disaster, with 1,420 incidents, followed by forest and land fires, 973 incidents, extreme weather, 733 incidents, and landslide, 201 incidents, the deadliest causing the highest number of fatalities, 213 lives. This data reveal the escalating climate risk across sectors and regions. The persistence of such crises reflects an effectiveness of most environmental law responses. Due to highly complex natural systems of the earth that are being disrupted by an ever-increasing number of people. Over the decades, environmental law has evolved through instruments like the Stockholm Declaration 1972 and the Rio Declaration 1992, which remain largely anthropocentric, focusing on human welfare rather than the integrity of the planet. Only in recent efforts, such as the Oslo Manifesto for Ecological Law and Governance and the IUCN World Declaration on Environmental Rule of Law, both in 2016, have ideas like ecological integrity on non-regression began to take root as guiding principle of international law, such as ecological integrity, rights of natures, rights to natures, indubio pro natura, progression and non-regression, and intragenerational and intergenerational justice related principles. Yet, despite these developments, environmental law, as we know, it has failed to stop the planetary crisis. It has failed to stop the planetary crisis. It remains a compartmentalized tool supporting economic growth, anthropocentric, and reductionist, lacking across, Ibu Ayi, a multidisciplinary approach. Law must now evolve beyond regulation toward integration, restoration, and justice. It must go beyond anthropocentrism to redefine humanity's place within the Earth's life system as the long-standing view that position humans above nature is no longer adequate to address the realities of the Anthropocene. A new paradigm is therefore required, one that integrates humans and ecological interests in pursuit of balance and equity. Such a paradigm shift demands the reconceptualization of legal principles to place ecological integrity at the core of our legal architecture. Law must no longer treat nature merely as a resource for human exploitation, but as a living system to which humanity belongs, working to sustain a mutually enhancing relationship between people and the planet. To guide this transformation, 5 principles must underpin our legal architecture. The first principle is strong sustainability. The second one is ecological primacy. The third one, ecological integrity. The fourth one, ecological limits. And the fifth, ecological justice. First, strong sustainability. Under strong sustainability, nature is not a commodity or a stock of capital. It is a living system with function that cannot be replaced by man-made wealth. Indonesia has taken a step toward this paradigm through Constitutional Court decision number 35 year 2023, which rejected a mining company's petition to allow mining on small islands. The court reaffirmed Article 33, Paragraph 4 of the 1945 Constitution as a foundation for the application of strong sustainability, recognizing ecosystem as critical natural capital that cannot be substituted by man-made wealth. The determination of CNC, or critical natural capital, is based on criteria of criticality, which include at least two factors: the level of threat, and the second one, the level of importance. Coastal areas and small islands meet both. They are ecologically vital, yet highly vulnerable to degradation and climate change. Thus, this ecosystem must be safeguarded as irreplaceable, especially from mining activities, which the court rightly labeled abnormally dangerous activities. When we compare strong sustainability with prevailing practice, we still find the domination of weak sustainability, a short-run concept that assumes natural capital can be substituted by man-made wealth. For example, Nauru once grew rapidly from mining, but 80% of its land was destroyed. Ecosystem collapsed and its economy fell apart. Pakistan saw similar patterns. GDP growth followed by ecological deficit and eventual decline. In Indonesia, this mindset persists in laws like the Article 34A, Law number 6/2023 on job creation, Article 75 Government Regulation, number 23 and 2021, and Article 127 Government Regulation number 2021, which allows national strategic project, even in protected conservation areas, or even if they are not yet included in spatial zoning plan, can be given license to be exploited. When environmental costs are ignored and passed on as externalities, they do not vanish. They accumulate, transforming into a debt our children will be forced to pay. The image before us captures this tragedy. A father handing his child a bag of money while the land around them lies barren and lifeless. It is a haunting reflection of our times, where material wealth is preserved, yet the very foundation of life has been exhausted. What good is money in a world without clean air to breathe, water to drink, or soil to sustain? If we continue down this path, our legacy will be ecologically disastrous. Ecological primacy. The second principle, law must ensure that ecological protection holds primacy over economic policy regimes. Environmental concerns are not costs. They are the very foundation of prosperity. By placing ecology first, we can achieve coherence among law, ecology, development, and justice. The third principle, ecological integrity. The sustainability of ecosystem depends on recognizing the strong interdependence between humans and nature, because Earth functions as a complex system of living and non-living components continuously interacting. Fourth, the ecological limits. To uphold this integrity, law must also define ecological limits, the carrying capacity and resilience of ecosystem. Without these limits, development risks becoming destruction. The last principle is ecological justice. This brings us to the heart of today's topic. Ecological justice. It ensures that both present and future generations, human and other living beings, enjoy fair access to earth resources, and that no community or species is unfairly burdened by environmental harm. It integrates three dimensions of justice. Dimension one is the procedural, ensuring participation in decision making. Number two is recognitional justice, respecting diverse worldviews and indigenous knowledge. The third dimension is distributional justice, ensuring fairness in sharing benefits and burdens. They are applied through the lens of interspecies, intergenerational, and intragenerational justice, acknowledging that human and nature are interdependent.
Pak Santosa, it's
Berapa lagi, Bu?
2 more minutes.
Okay. Ecological justice also relates to the recognition of legal personhood for nature, granting it stronger standing against human-induced harm. The rights of nature's framework assert that ecosystems have the right to exist, thrive, and to regenerate. It challenges the anthropocentric view of nature as property, affirming its intrinsic value as a foundation for sustainability. Indonesia, meanwhile, has the foundation Article 20H, 33 paragraph 3, 33 paragraph 4 of the 1945 Constitution, guaranteeing environmental rights, public trust, and sustainability, yet it lacks state environmental duties, a crucial gap that must be addressed if Indonesia is to lead in ecological constitutionalism as a way to achieve ecological justice. Ecuador, Bolivia, New Zealand, Colombia, and India each provide unique lessons in how the rights of nature can be recognized and operationalized through constitution of law. In Ecuador, nature, Mother Earth, or Pachamama, is recognized in 2008 Constitution as legal entity with the right to exist and regenerate. This marks a paradigm shift from viewing nature as property to recognizing it as a rights-bearing subject. Bolivia extends the same spirit through its law of the rights of Mother Earth 2010 and the framework law for living well 2012. In New Zealand, indigenous worldview inspired the Urewera Act 2014 and Te Awa Tupua Act 2017, granting legal personhood to a forest and a river. Colombia's constitutional court as well. Finally, in India, the Uttarakhand High Court in 2017 declared the Ganges and Yamuna rivers as living entities under Indian common law, citing constitutional and cultural duties to protect them from pollution and exploitation. Together, this is last part, Ibu Moderator, these examples illustrate a global evolution that recognizes nature's intrinsic value and interdependence with human life. So where do we go from here? Addressing planetary crisis requires not just policy reform, but a paradigmatic shift in how we conceive development, democracy, governance, and rule of law itself. Legal and policy frameworks must evolve beyond growth-driven models. To respond to the challenges of the Anthropocene, 5 core principles, as I mentioned before, must guide Indonesia's legal and policy direction: ecological integrity, ecological limits, strong sustainability, ecological primacy, and ecological justice. Yet, many existing laws remain inconsistent with this principle. To realize this vision, Indonesia must embed the principle of ecological integrity, the 5 principles, in every policy development process. Integrate them across all sectors and policies, economic, spatial, and development planning through synchronized or gradual legal harmonization. Colleague, this is our moment to build a legal order that protects both people and the planet as one living system. The path ahead demands courage, the courage to reshape law in this Anthropocene epoch. Let us permeate the principle strong sustainability, ecological integrity, primacy, limits, and justice into all legal regime, especially economic development related legal regime. Because when we recognize that the fate of humankind is inseparable from the fate of nature, we can truly claim to have achieved justice for all life on earth. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pak Santosa, for the presentations. He said that safe planet is not enough because what we need is a just planet. And now we are going to hear for the second presenter, Mbak Dewi Kartika, and she will explain on how this justice is not working and how then it should be worked. So she will present about ecological justice from land, strengthening indigenous and agrarian rights, exploring how fair access to land and recognitions of community rights contributes to environmental protections and justice. If you want to stand up, then please, time for 15 to 20 minutes.
Ya, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera, salam sehat, Bapak Ibu sekalian. I will try my best speaking in English. So, thank you for the organizing committee for inviting me. It is my honor to be here to speak in front of you among the professor and scholars circles. Thank you, Ibu Dahliana Hasan, Ibu Dekan Fakultas Hukum UGM, kemudian Ibu Sri Wiyanti Ediono, dan Ketua Panitia dan seluruh rekan-rekan, all professors, scholars, and all the guests who are here. So I will try to define how ecological justice from the land can be contributions for strengthening indigenous and agrarian justice, and also on how to get recovery regarding our environments. The next slide. Yeah. So I will talk more on how, even though this is like a law faculty, but I will talk more on how the bad law making bad impact in the ground. So maybe my experience can also contribute on how we can shifting our paradigm and how to overcome environmental crisis, including on how to overcome also land rights crisis that still very far away from the people in the ground, like peasants and indigenous peoples. So this is some of my thoughts about how to make sure that there is unbalancings between the economic justice and also ecological justice, because sometimes it's not about like dichotomy between both terminology, but it's sometimes in our practice, in our experience, it depends on the political orientations, about ideology that set up by Indonesia on how to make sure that economic justice, ecological justice can meet with the recognitions of the people's land rights. And also, from our experience, it is important to understand not only about agrarian law or law itself, but also sometimes in many structural problem, it should be also on how to connecting between our understanding on agrarian political. It should be beyond legalistic approach, because in our experience, many people being criminalized or being discriminated over their rights because the approach of the state government's apparatus in the field, because there are a legalistic approach that has been happening in the ground. So, and also we see that the law, it's also compromise between political interests, between elite business entity, and it's capital driven also. And the last part of my presentations, I will talk more on how we can promote agrarian reform and new economic model to make sure that there is a inline spirit between economic justice and ecological justice, that also meeting with the recognitions of the people regarding the lands. And sometimes, because I come from a movement, and my background not only social anthropology, but also we are more involved in the movement as social activists. So we see sometimes in the ground, in the policy advocacy process, there is a gap between campus as a scholar circle, like between the reality and the social movement. This is also become one of the problem that we need to figure out on how to overcome the crisis. Next. And when we try to defining ecological justice from the land, my perspective is ecological justice is a framework that expands the concept of justice to include the relationship between human, communities, society, and the world nature. It's argued that social justice and environmental integrity are two sides of the same coin, where we cannot go without another. So, but it's not simple as that. When we see in the reality, there is a gap and also paradigm problem, challenge, even like tensions, not only tensions between grassroots movement, community, and the states or the business entity, but also tensions in community itself. Because in our experience, sometimes there is a contradictions between land rights recognitions demands, we can call like agrarian reform agenda, versus or vis-a-vis with environmental sustainability. This is the problem that often facing the challenge on how the community can gain their land rights fully recognized by the state, but also still in line with the sustainability environmental. So that's the context that I want to put. Next. So this is the structural problem that we have, because our land is divided into two authority, and it's also reflect on how the problem in the ground. So you can see that from Aceh to Papua, our land having a problem because there is land dualisms in Indonesia. This is the root of the problem. Since we have basic agrarian law 1960, there is no these dualisms. But after the birth of forestry law, now the land become divided into two categories. 62% is belong to the forestry territory, and the rest of it is land under the authority of agrarian ministry. So this is that will define the problem in the ground, where many people have a conflict not only with the land, over the land, but also have a conflict with the state claim over forest. So this is become happening in the centuries. That's until now there is no solutions for the people to maintain their land rights, including on how to conserve the land or the nature. Next. This is just example on how the interests of the parties between state, between business entities, and people cannot meet in the ground. You can see that from our monitoring report from January to December in 2024, there is 295 land conflict. This is in all sector. The highest number is because of the plantations business, like palm oil. The second one is the land conflict that caused by the mining business. And the third one, because the infrastructure development that grab people's land in the ground. And also like capture or claiming the villages, claiming the indigenous territory because of the interest of infrastructure development, including national project program like PSN. And then the rest of it is land conflict because of the forestry problem and then agribusiness like food estate and military facilities development. So you can see the impact in the ground. There is over 1 million hectares are affected by all the law-making process, by the concessions, permit that's issued by the governments and also facilitate the private company. Next. This is our monitoring on how in 1 decade there is agrarian conflict, and also it's become the highest in the last 2 decades. It's more increased compared to Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono governance. During 10 years, there is more than 3,000 land conflict or agrarian conflict in many sectors. Again, plantations business, including palm oil, become the highest number of the source of the conflict against people's rights, indigenous, peasants, even fisherfolk communities, not only in rural areas, but also spreading in urban areas, where the land become commodity, natural resources become commodity, and not as a tool to achieve agrarian justice or even ecological justice. You can see that there are so many land grabbing actions done by the state based on the law that has been produced, president regulations, many regulations that facilitate these cases. Next. And this is the more impact if the land conflict situations or agrarian conflict are maintained and not resolved, because the governments still using a repressive approach and mobilize police, mobilize military to prevent the protests or to facing the aspirations from people in the ground. You can see that the number of criminalizations case that facing by indigenous peoples, by farmers or peasants or women, even women become the victim of criminalization when they are defend their land rights. Not only criminalization, but also physical violations, being shot, even like 79 peoples in the ground has lost their life to defend their land rights. Next. So sometimes the governments try to mix between agrarian conflict, that the characteristic is the structural conflict, with the ordinary cases, like inherited cases or cases, land conflict between business entities or land conflict between business and the government. But when we're talking about agrarian conflict, this is about agrarian conflict that saw in the field there is a land grabbing process over people's land rights like peasants, indigenous peoples, and other vulnerable groups in rural areas, in urban areas, that facilitated by law and driven by capital. So this is the definitions of agrarian conflict based on our experience. This is involving a community, involving a village or kampung or sub-village, and also where the people communities face to face with the big scale companies, can be companies owned by the state or private companies. Next, and this is also the situations when the conflict also become latent or manifest in Indonesia. It's more giving more impacts like land inequality. You can see in Indonesia, the land inequality become very huge gap where 1% of the elites or certain group owning and controlling 58% of land in Indonesia. This is such a land inequality that happened in Indonesia. And you can see also the inequality when we see that only 60 family, rich, super rich family owning and controlling 26.8 million hectares of land in Indonesia.
4 minutes more.
Yeah, in contrary, there is 17 million smallholder farmers or peasants that having less than half hectares of land, even like more lower than half hectares of land. Including, of course, it make impacts poverty in rural areas. Next, this is just some data you can check later, but this is also to see that land equality exists and very clear that the good land governance and also agrarian justice is not happening in Indonesia because the landholder are more controlled by big company, private company, and also foreign company even. Next. Maybe we can go to another slide about how we can overcome the crisis. Yeah. Next. Next. This is about the, okay, there is also challenge because like Pak Ota has mentioned, we have also job creations law that violate justice of the people, and this has become extraordinary crime because against constitutional, and also the job creations law is also result through the manipulative and unconstitutional processes. Next, this is just example before the law on job creations. The situation is still there, but there is in the beginning of Reformation era, we try to connect between how to meeting between the ecological justice and also agrarian justice. We have MPR degree on 2001 on agrarian reform and natural resources. That also, this is a consensus between the environmental movement with the land rights movement. But unfortunately, this MPR degree is not being implemented until now. Next. Yeah, this is, you can see that so many law, land-related law, food law, and farmers law, forestry law are contradict each other, even become worse after the job creations law. Next. This is ease of doing business after the job creations law. Next. And then now the Prabowo have the new political will on agrarian reform. He tends to continue agrarian reform agenda after Jokowi by the targeting 9 million hectares of the PIP to redistribute to people, including on how to resolve the conflict that faced by peasants and indigenous. Next. But unfortunately, 1 year of President Prabowo, you can see agrarian reform is not being implemented, but again, we are in the wrong directions. More challenges because food system are more in favor to give the function or the role of the food producer to the big companies in the name of food estate project for food security program, and also militarization that involve military and police to produce the food, replacing peasants, replacing indigenous, replacing women in producing food. Next. This is example how palm oil business also causing become the highest drivers of the land conflict in the last 2 decades. Next. Again, wrong directions. PSN, National Strategic Project, causing many land conflict, even higher since 2020 until 2040, it's keep increasing. How the PSN impact on the people's livelihood. Next, this is Land Bank, Bank Tanah. This is the new agency that created by Omnibus Law, Undang-Undang Cipta Kerja. Next. This is some example where land bank try to occupy the land that making more conflict and tensions with the indigenous and peasants in the rural areas. Next, new directions. I think, sorry for the time, but I want to make it short about how we can overcome the crisis in meeting ecological justice from the land through agrarian reform agenda. Next. So in the last National Peasants Day on 24th September 2025, we try to reminding Prabowo governments about agrarian reform agenda that being kept away from the priority agenda of this government. So we promote 9 reform that need to be implemented by Parliament, also by the President, if the government are taking seriously on how to implement agrarian reform. Next. This is, maybe you can read later, but one of the main problem is we don't have special body to implement agrarian reform on how to resolve the conflict, on how to implement land redistributions to the peasants, small-scale farmers, and also how to improve the livelihood and economic situations in rural and in urban areas. Next. This is, okay, the last one. Yeah, this is the 895 cases of priority locations on agrarian reform that keep unresolved. And now we are trying to pushing this conflict resolutions agenda on how to address this situation. So this is 1.7 million of priority locations of agrarian reform that we hand over to the government to be resolved immediately. Next. But also some of the good example on how when people being protected over their territory, being have a full control over the land, you can see that the people can manage by their own on how to manage their kampung, their village, their indigenous territory, and even manage themselves. This is one example in North Sulawesi, where land conflict that has been last in 35 years has been resolved because they are united in the farmers' unions. And you can see also on how women, rural women, farmers' women can achieve land rights by the agrarian reform process that come from below, where the data, where the process is more full participation from the people. Next. This is some example also in Banten province, where the peasants and indigenous community gaining their communal rights after 25 years of land conflict. Next. And this is how we created new model of economy to create new food supply between the peasants who have land conflict with the state-owned forest in the 3 districts, Batang, Indramayu, and Cilacap, and also Majalengka, as a food producer and connecting directly to the labor movement. So this is how we try to cut the capitalism's approach, that sometimes there are so many supply chains, but then we cut into only 4 and 5 supply chains. So this is more fair both for peasants who produce the food and also more economic but also good nutrition for the labor movement. So this is, I think, the close from me. So I think this is important on how we keep doing the legal reform in order to make sure that we strengthen people's livelihood and also people's right over the land. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Mbak Dewi Kartika, for the presentations. Now we see that from Pak Santosa, he said that Anthropocene perspective is not enough to create just ecology. Mbak Dewi Sartika also said that it's not enough, we just used positivistic, formalistic approach to bring ecological justice. Nah, the last one, we are going to hear from Dr. Sroyon Mukhreji, how then we should revisiting ecological justice, theoretical foundations and emerging paradigms, emphasizing its contributions to the conceptual framework, theory, and academic discourse. So you have time for 15 to maximum 20 minutes.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. Thank you very much for inviting me to this talk. Yeah, just checking if I'm audible. Hello.
Yes.
Hello.
Yes. It's
just checking
clear.
if I'm audible. Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you. I just had some issues with my internet just now, so in case I drop off, please bear with me. I will reconnect. I'm exploring two different internet networks right now. Yeah, I just wanted to start off by saying thank you and warm greetings to the Faculty of Law at UGM, to Dr. Hassan, to Dr. Ediono, to the organizing committee, and congratulations to the organizing committee for organizing what looks like a fantastic program. Warm greetings to my fellow speakers as well, Dr. Santosa and Dr. Kartika, and to our moderator, Dr. Pradhani. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's a real honor to be here. My only regret is that I can't be there in person, and that is not due to the organizing committee's lack of efforts. They did everything they could. In fact, they were extremely cooperative and efficient in trying to process everything. The Indonesian government also issued my visa very, very quickly. Rather, it's an issue on my end with my Singaporean residence permit, which prevents me from traveling abroad. So I'm sorry to be missing out, but I'm happy that at least the wonders of modern technology allows me to present online. But yeah, I would have really loved to be there because the room looks like such a nice vibe and so cozy and friendly, but at the same time filled with experts in their fields and leading minds in environmental law and law generally. So thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here. And without further ado, I'll like to start my talk about revisiting ecological justice, theoretical foundations, and emerging paradigms. So this is a quick outline of my talk. I'll start by talking about ecological justice paradigms. Secondly, just touch on why we feel that there is a need for new paradigms. And thirdly, a whistle-stop tour of some new and emerging paradigms. Thankfully, some of the groundwork for me has already been done by Dr. Santosa, because otherwise this is such a huge topic that it could really take up hours or even days to cover, to do justice to. But I'm grateful to Dr. Santosa for doing some of the groundwork and introducing some of the concepts that I would like to perhaps now elaborate on. And also to Dr. Kartika for the excellent presentation on land rights, because as she said, law is sometimes good law, but sometimes bad law, or even I would argue that sometimes good law has bad enforcement, which then means that the the goodness of the law is not realized. So that's really helpful to hear from someone who has a perspective from on the ground and who has personal experience in activism and how law is applied in the field. Because it's one thing to study law as an academic when you're sitting at your desk or reading papers or judgments, but it's entirely different when you're on the field and when you see the problems that people are confronting from day to day. So thank you very much for your extremely rich and informative perspectives that the two speakers have shared before me. Okay, so moving on, this is something that Dr. Sentosa already covered, so I won't go into this in too much detail, but there are various paradigms of ecological justice, right? And depending on what source you look at, you might come up with different lists, but this is something that I'm just using as a working list, which is by no means exhaustive. So there is intergenerational justice, which is justice between different generations, so a current generation and the rights of the future generation. There is interspecies justice, which is, I would argue, one of the relatively newer paradigms, because traditionally law in general and environmental law in particular has been very anthropocentric, right? So the rights of people and the comfort of people and the agency of people has been at the center of law, whereas the natural world is rather seen as a resource to be exploited. Or even if you're taking a more benign or benevolent perspective, the natural world is seen as something that humans should take care of. So it's like we have the primary responsibility and we are like the masters of the universe who can decide how the natural world should be used, and then it's our responsibility to look after the natural world. But what these new emerging paradigms are saying is, no. It's not that we are the center of the universe or the center of the natural world. Other species have just as much right or just as much claim to protection or to agency, and therefore we are trying to kind of decenter the whole way of thinking about humans and our relationship to the environment. Now, ecocentrism, I should say, I just described it as an emerging paradigm, but at the same time, it's not exactly new, because ecocentrism is something that has been incorporated in indigenous worldviews for a really long time. However, at the moment, ecocentrism is not the mainstream, or in the last few decades, ecocentrism hasn't been the mainstream in environmental law. So it is now gradually being pushed into the field by new emerging ecological justice paradigms. Third, there's distributional justice, which means that benefits and harms should be evenly distributed. So it should not be that the benefits flow to certain sections of society and the harms flow to other sections of society, because traditionally what has happened is that there are existing deep social inequalities, right, in this world, and social inequalities and the existence of marginalized communities often means that, unfortunately, when we are talking about environmental justice, the benefits of any environmental programs often flow to people who are already quite well off, whereas the harms of environmental programs or the harms of environmental damage are often suffered by marginalized communities who are least well off. So that's so to counter that is the idea of distributional justice. Finally, there's the idea of procedural justice, which is that justice should be transparent and participatory. So as Dr. Kartika was saying just now, agrarian rights is an excellent example where sometimes you have situations where the laws and regulations are not necessarily taking into account the daily realities of the people on the ground, of the people who are suffering the harms, and they do not necessarily have the transparency to understand what's going on, and they do not necessarily have the avenues to engage in true participatory justice, to approach the courts, for example, and claim for their rights, or to petition government, for example, or lobbies are often dominated by large corporates, and smaller groups or indigenous communities or individual citizens are often marginalized. So procedural justice is a part and parcel of ecological justice, which would ensure transparent and participatory justice across the board. Okay, moving on to the next slide. This is just a series of headlines from the Guardian newspaper of the UK, and this is just from the last 2 weeks, right? These are all just from the last 2 weeks, and from the environment and climate crisis section. Now, I've deliberately chosen, as you can tell, some of the more grim or disheartening or negative stories. But the truth of the matter is that if you look at the environment page of any major newspaper, perhaps not the most right-wing newspapers, but almost every other kind of centrist or left-leaning newspaper, you will find, unfortunately, far more negative news about the environment than positive news. And that's not a good thing, obviously, right? So it points to the fact that society as a whole and law in particular have to a greater or lesser degree been failing the environment for the last 100 years, since industrialization, really. And that's why we have, you see, all the headlines about the cyclone in the Philippines that you all know about. The fact that the UN head is saying that humanity has almost certainly missed its target of restricting anthropogenic climate change to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. There's headlines about Trump's dismissal of climate science, huge storms in Jamaica and Cuba and the Philippines as well, which is not on the screen. Climate disasters being the costliest ever on record. So it's not just that people are suffering, but it's also real financial or economic damage. Damage to coral reefs, which is causing coral species to become functionally extinct. A humpbacked whale found dead in the water, potentially due to overfishing and caught in shark nets. Not enough international climate aid going to transitioning communities. So this shows the kind of socio-political and global political science ramifications and inequalities and unfairness that is in place. And finally, from the private or corporate sector, you have oil firms making misleading green statements. I mean, this is just one example. There are many about big oil and energy companies and so on, who are making misleading statements or whose CEOs are earning massive profits but causing huge damage to the environment as well. So this is, I'm sorry if I start off my presentation on a rather grim note, but I promise it gets better from here on. Okay, so it's just to drive home the urgency of the situation that we find ourselves in, and the need for ecological and emerging paradigms. Okay, so I'll talk now because I said that I'll talk about ecological paradigms and some new emerging paradigms. Now, when I was going through about going through and trying to think about what ecological paradigms I can talk about, there are just so many, right? And I'm just kind of trying to wrap my head and think about how I'm going to fit all that in. And then the kind of conclusion I came to is that I'll focus more on my own personal interests, because I could potentially go on all day if I try to cover everything. And I'm sure you've been very patiently listening to a lot of presentations, and there's a lot of information coming at you. So I don't need to go on and on. So I will just be fairly selective and talk about things that are part of my own research interest, because and then I'm sure that the subsequent panels will explore in much greater detail various other ecological paradigms as well. So my own research interest at the moment, right, is about valuation of natural resources, which means how do you put a monetary value on natural resources. So you have on the slide a bee, which is representing natural services such as pollination, and then you have a flower which is representing natural resources, right? So you have natural services and natural resources. And one of my research interests is about how law puts a monetary value on such natural resources and services. Because if someone damages your car, for example, right, or someone steals your car, it's relatively easy to find out what the cost of your car is, because you can just go to the marketplace and see what's the cost of a second-hand car that has about the same age and wear as your car. So it's a good that's bought and sold on the market, which makes it very easy to determine its price. But when something is not bought and sold on the market, like most environmental goods and resources, then it's a lot harder to determine its price. And my PhD thesis, which I did at the London School of Economics, and it sits at the intersection of law and economics. So my thesis was about how different ways in which law and courts put a monetary value on goods that are not sold on the environment. So we call them non-market goods. So moving on to the next slide, my thesis was inspired by this quote from the English author G.K. Chesterton, who lives from about the mid-1850s to the mid-1950s. And he asks very poetically, what is the usual charge for seeing the clouds shattered by the sun? What is the market price of a tree blue on the skyline? This is, thank you. So this is from an essay in 1909. And this led me to do research on how to put a monetary value on natural resources. So you have the Great Barrier Reef, for example, and there's this headline about the valuation of the Great Barrier Reef at 56 billion Australian dollars. But then you also have, sorry, next slide, controversy about, you can skip this slide actually to move on to the next slide about the reef. So you also have controversy about should such things be valued at all, right? So sorry, on the next slide, I think there's the reef. So there's controversy about whether we should be putting monetary value on natural resources. So okay, I'll just try and see, does this work? Can you see my slides? Maybe this is easier. Yeah. Okay. So I'll swiftly move on from this slide. So this is a categorization of different forms of environmental value that I advanced as part of my PhD research. But the core message of the slide is that there are many different values that nature can provide us with. So market value is not the only way to value nature. And if we find the true value of nature, then perhaps we will be better informed to make decisions. So if you're deciding whether to if there's a nature park, for example, and you're deciding whether to partition off part of that nature park and build a shopping mall, then you need to take into account the true value of the nature park, not just the monetary value, right? So my thesis was about finding what we call non-use values or existence values, and different kinds of values that are perhaps not taken into account in a more simplistic valuation exercise. The next slide is about rights of nature, which Dr. Santosa has already covered. This is another of the emerging paradigms that I was going to talk about, but since he's talked about it so eloquently, I will skip over this one. The next slide is about distributive justice, right? So about different countries. So distributive justice can work both at the level of communities. So within a country, for example, Dr. Kartika just mentioned that there are in Indonesia, you have some people who are very rich and are consuming a disproportionate amount of resources, but at the same time, you also have people that are very poor and that are on the margins and who are consuming very small amounts of the resources, but are bearing a huge environmental burden or huge burden from environmental damage. But inequality also operates at the level of country, right? But at the same time, we have to kind of think about the data very critically. So in this slide, what you see is Singapore, which is the country I'm based in, is the world's 73rd largest emitter. So which looks quite good, right? 73rd. So there are many countries which are emitting more than Singapore. But bear in mind that this is about total emissions. So the next slide, which I have here, is about, which I have here is when you look at not total emissions, but emissions per square kilometer or emissions per capita. And in these categories, you see that Singapore is much, much higher, right? So in terms of emissions per square kilometer, Singapore is right at the top. And in terms of emissions per capita, Singapore is about like 12th or 11th, I think. So it's not only a marker of global inequalities where some countries are perhaps emitting more than others or should bear a greater share of responsibility, but it's also about the need to be alive to data, right? And the need for transparency. Because the more data we have and the more data literate we are, the more critically we can analyze these kinds of charts. So when the US tells us that China is the world's biggest emitter and therefore there should be like major sanctions against China, which to an extent is true. Of course, China emits a huge amount of CO2, but we should also look at emissions per capita and emissions per square kilometer and things like that. And in those terms, for example, China is a lot lower, as is Indonesia, right? So in the previous slide, Indonesia is I think in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8th place, whereas in these other slides where you were looking at per capita or per square kilometer, Indonesia is much lower.
Is up.
Yeah, okay, so I'll just skip to my conclusion slide. Yeah, so the next two slides were about climate litigation. So two huge cases in 2024 this one was brought by retired women from Switzerland, and then this one is brought by young people from the Pacific Islands, and they both resulted in victories, you might say, for the climate. So the first one was a decision by the European Court of Human Rights, and the second one was an advisory opinion by the ICJ. And this shows the intergenerational nature of climate change and also the intergenerational nature of the solutions being sought by climate change, where we have groups, some student groups, as well as some groups of retired women who are trying to do what many generations of politicians who are perhaps in their middle-aged politicians haven't done, which is being done by people who are formerly on the sort of margins. So just to conclude, I covered 4 paradigms of ecological justice: intergenerational, interspecies, distributional, and procedural. I talked about different forms of new paradigms such as intrinsic value, rights of nature, global inequalities and data, and climate litigation. And finally, I would just like to quickly end with a quote, which is from an article called, you see on the slide. It says, "In these dark times, the virtue we need is hopeful pessimism." So the quote goes, this is an article which I encourage all of you to read. It's free to read, and you can just Google hopeful pessimism and Aeon, which is the name of the publication. So it says, "To behold with open eyes the reality before us requires courage, and not to turn away from it, forbearance, and yet not to decide that it ends there. This is hope. What hopeful pessimism asks is that we strive for change without certainties, without expecting anything from our efforts, other than the knowledge that we have done what we are called upon to do as moral agents in a time of change." So they are saying that it's a caution against toxic positivity, right? Saying that yes, things will be good no matter what. So it's saying that we should rather be more realistic and not be toxic, not necessarily be positive in a toxic way, but face reality and realize that times are difficult, but we still need to do our bit. Because if we don't do anything, then times are going to get worse still. And on that sort of somewhat pessimistic, but also I think hopeful note, I will end my talk. Apologies for going a few minutes over time, and I look forward to a great discussion. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so this is the presentations from our third last speaker. So we have time for discussions, very limited for maximum 15 minutes. So I will just open for 1 sessions. So if anyone have any questions, please raise up your hands, as well as for the committee. If there are questions from the chat box, just please let me know. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, just very short, 30 seconds for each of you. Name and questions. The mic, please. Oh, the mic is on your table.
Hello, am I audible? My name is Wisnu Aisatya, and I'm an independent researcher and freediver at Trilogy Ocean Restoration. And I have a question about the environmental degradation agenda that has been discussed in this panel. What I want to ask is about how the panel speakers react about the new treaties about BBNG agreements that will be enacted into force in 2026, and it will be enacting every aspect of economic benefits, particularly the blue economic agenda, because it's transformed the common heritage of mankind into a new regime called benefit sharing mechanism. Is it gonna be change the balance between economic benefits and the conversation, or is gonna be?
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Sorry, your name is?
Vishnu Alisatya.
Wisnu. So you are questioning about the Copenhagen Agreement.
No, the BBNG.
BNG.
BBNG agreement, the high sea treaties.
BPNG agreement. Okay.
Thank
That's
you.
for the first questions. Mas Rangga, very short, please. Yes. No, not yet.
Hi. Is very short a commentary on my height, or are you saying that I should?
Questions.
The question. Thank you. Because I am also a short king. This is because I am also the conference organizer. My name is Rangga. I am a lecturer here. I'm interested in indigenous people's issues. And I want to ask something to Ibu Dewi Kartika. There is Ibu Sartika and Ibu Kartika. It's quite confusing. But maybe you don't have to answer this on this panel because we're running out of time. But like, maybe you mentioned that agrarian conflict requires a specific attention because the agrarian issue is an extra layer that would require an extraordinary approach. Now, adding an indigenous people's dimension, I feel like it further complicates the way that these conflicts should be addressed. So maybe we should talk about this over lunch, but like, what would be the most sensible first step that this government, the Prabowo government, should take in order to address agrarian conflict that involves the land grabbing of indigenous lands? Because it feels like this isn't a new issue, so it's since 1999, so like, very curious. Thank you.
Yeah, it's still colonialization period. Very good questions. Second, then someone there are for those two women, then those two men. Yes. Very quick questions, please.
Can you hear me though? Yes. Okay. I think my question applies to all panelists.
Closer to the mic, please.
It is audible. Okay. I think my question applies to all panelists, and I'm just wondering why the association of economic extraction, exploitation, or economic benefit with environmental preservation. I think from what we see of the practice of carbon trading, carbon market, we see more harmed than repair. We see more injured rights. We see more communities whose rights were infringed in the process of just generating of this carbon offset, of in the process of the creation of this carbon market. Then why the push for this act, for this measure that explicitly violated their rights? Even though, yes, we are in the talks of creating safeguards, yes, we are in the talk of creating a better governance to it, but our practices since the Kyoto Protocol demonstrated that this is not something that requires economic exploitation, where especially it concerns the idea of economic preservation. Those things need to be diverged, not combined or unified within the same context. Thank you.
Okay, what's your name?
Anna.
Anna?
Yes.
Thank you, Anna, for the questions for all the speakers. In front of Anna.
Okay, my name is Giovanni Linggameredinata from Universitas Gadjah Mada. I want to ask for Mr. Santosa. I come from village in Paragor Regency, East Java, an area where the majority of the population work as farmers. However, in recent years, I've witnessed firsthand how agricultural condition is our village are increasingly difficult. The younger generation, especially Gen Z, is losing interest in farming due to the ever-increasing cost of seed, fertilizer, and land tax, while the selling price of crop remain low. And then, furthermore, approximately 7,800 hectares of agricultural land is our area has been taken over by the government for the construction of reservoir. From my story, I want to ask, how can the principle of ecological justice be applied so that large infrastructure development like reservoir are not only oriented toward economic interests, but also able to protect the ecological right or rural communities, including referring in the interests of the younger generation to see land and agriculture as a just sustainable future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Giovanni. The last two, one woman, one man there. Yeah, those last. Very quick questions, please, from two of you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for the occasion. My name is Diahratna Prabaningrum. I am a master degree student at Faculty of Law GADJAH Mada University. I want to ask to Mr. Santosa that I see in your slide before that you wrote Indonesia must have constitutional framework to save the environment. So I wanna ask, did it means that our constitution it's not green constitution and
need to be amended, okay?
yes,
Yeah.
for the fifth to make it more greens. Thank you.
Thank you. The last one. Greener constitution.
Okay. My name is Muhammad Webriansa, Pajajaran University. In law number 32 of 2009 concerning the protection and management of the environmental, which actually provides the punishment instrument for environmental crimes, namely administrative, civil, and most recently criminal law. And any question, how is your views on Indonesian environmental law that use the principle of ultimum remedy or criminal law enforcement as last resort? Thank you.
To Mbak Kartika or Pak Santosa?
To Pak Santosa.
Okay, very good. Is there any questions from online? No? Ada. Okay. So there are six participants who asked. I will put this into each of the speakers. First, for Pak Santoso, the questions is about here, why then economic extractions being validated by the law? Questions from Anna, and then from Giovanni. She's explained about the experience of Gen Z to do farming, but there is constructions of water. So how can we address ecological justice when it face against large water reservoir constructions who grab the rural community land? And also questions from Dia and Muhammad about do we have green constitutions? If not, should we make greener constitutions? The last one. What do you think about ultimum remedium for the environmental law cases? That's for Pak Santosa. And then for Mbak Dewi, agrarian conflicts from Mas Rangga. So where is the positions of indigenous people and how the government should respond towards the land grabbing of indigenous communities, as well as the questions about economic got validated through the law, which then validated the people rights as well as bring damage for the environment. And last one for Sroyan, there are two questions. The first is same questions about economics and then which harm the environment and validated by the law, as well as the questions from Wisnu about PNG Agreement 2026. Do you think it will bring economic benefits towards the world or not? So each of you 5 minutes.
If you look at, thank you, Sartika. If you look at our constitutions, and it's already been interpreted by Constitutional Court in 2023, Article 33, Paragraph 4, it says the economic development should be based on the principle of sustainability, ecosystem approach, and justice. That's Article 33, Paragraph 3. And it was interpreted by Constitutional Court in one case, and Constitutional Court has an opinion that Article 33, Paragraph 3 is a legal basis for the application of strong sustainability, which is all critical natural capitals cannot be substituted and replaced by man-made wealth. Remember the picture. And the problem is the decision of Constitutional Court has not been adopted by the government of Indonesia. So there is a dysynchronized between the decision of Constitutional Court and the policy-making process in the government and legislature, in the parliament. So that's the problem, actually. I think when I said that the legal regime in relation to the protection of the natural resources, our natural resources, should be shifted, the paradigm itself. So we propose, I think, Indonesia Ocean Justice Initiative and Indonesian Center for Environmental Law. So 5 principles. The first one is strong sustainability, based on Article 33, Paragraph 4. The second one is the ecological primacy. Ecology should be become Panglima or Commander-in-Chief, and directing the economic development models. So that's why when we introduce strong sustainability, ecological primacy, ecological limits, this is the challenge of our legal community, all of us, that we should translate it, how the legal regime could adapt to the 5 principles: strong sustainability, ecological primacy, ecological limits, and the 4th one is ecological, ecological justice, and there are 5 of us. So how do we translate it into all legal regime, particularly legal regime related to economic development, or economic or law related to economic development? And ecological primacy, for example. So we cannot rely on the existing environmental law when the paradigm of economic development is heavy economic growth to pursue 8% pertumbuhan or growth. And if we look at the example of Nauru and Pakistan, so the weak sustainability is a short run of concept, actually. So only maybe first year, second year, third year, and the high economic growth, and then will decrease suddenly because of the bio capacity deficit. And about the constitutions, our constitution is green, actually. It's not bad, but we need greener, like you mentioned as well. 33, Paragraph 4. 33 paragraph 3 and 28H is we call it substantive environmental rights, but 28H is still perceived as anthropocentric, only human-centered, and we need more, what do you call it? We need to recognize the interdependence between human-nature relationships. So they are interdependent actually. So I think 20H is, so we need the human rights actually, especially right to a healthy environment, right to a healthy and decent environment, but we need also the nature's right in addition to the human right. And about the other questions about the environmental crime, etc., and BBNJ, if you allow me, I would like to ask my researcher to answer BBNJ. I'm not so familiar with the BBNJ.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. And then for Mbak Dewi, please.
Yeah, I would like to answer the questions from Pak Rangga about what will be the priority for presidents to respond to on how to recognize indigenous territory and also to prevent indigenous from land grabbing processes that sometimes conducted by the private entity or sometimes by the state itself through the project developments. I think the first one, because the problem is our constitutions, including basic agrarian law, already recognize indigenous territory, the rights of the indigenous peoples over their land and territory. But the problem is, since 1960, when basic agrarian law already mandated the state to register all the land in Indonesia without tanpa pengecualian, without exceptions, since the kampung level, since the village level, that's not implemented until now. So during Jokowi governance, they try to register all the land through PTSL program, pendaftaran tanah sistematis lengkap. But in this PTSL project, they still avoiding to register indigenous territory. That's the problem. So that's why PTSL or land registrations under Jokowi and now continue by Prabowo still discriminate indigenous territory. So I think if the governments have the political will to recognize, the first one is to register all the IPs map or IPs land that has been mapped by participatory process. I think there's already like 25 millions over of indigenous territory that has been mapped, has been organized by IPs community and organizations like AMAN or KPA itself. So we already give the data, all the map to the governments, to agrarian ministers, to forestry ministers, to village ministers. All the ministers have the data. So it needs political will on how to register and also to go beyond legal approach, because agrarian ministers and forest ministers always using clear and clean approach, meaning that all the IPs territory cannot be recognized because many IPs territory claimed by forest state, claimed by mining company, claimed by plantation. So in the perspective of the governments, will always saying that this is not clear and clean area. So it's become like classic reasons that always repeating in many government period. So, and the second one is more paradigm change. because government, including after the Omnibus Law, Undang-Undang Cipta Kerja, tend to see peoples in the ground like peasants or indigenous or women in rural areas as the object of development, not as a primary actor of their development itself. Sometimes they call as beneficiary. I think we against the terminology of beneficiary, because it's more seeing people, human, as an object of development, not the agent of change, agent of reform. And also how to put the full trust on people, because government, state, is more putting the trust to the company or big holders compared to giving the trust to indigenous who have local wisdom, local knowledge, peasant who have their traditional on how to doing the farming. Sometimes they're not putting the trust to the people. So that's the problem on how big allocations of land and natural resources are more allocated for the big companies. And the third one, I think this is more medium. I don't want to say this is long term because it's been like 15 years, indigenous law. How the parliament, DPR, and also the president should immediately to issue indigenous law, including for agrarian reform movement. We also propose agrarian reform law, because this is more, will also protect not only indigenous, but also peaceful communities, women in rural areas, and also peasants or small-scale farmers. I think this is more long-term that we want to see if the governments really have a strong political will to recognize indigenous and rural communities. Yes, that's, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Mbak Dewi. Last, Sroyan, do you want to respond for the questions about PPNG?
Sure, I'll just very quickly respond, although I'm also not an expert on the BBNJ. I'm audible, right?
Yeah, it's clear.
Yeah. Okay, so for those who are not aware, the BBNJ is the Agreement on Marine Biological Diversity of Areas Beyond Natural Jurisdiction. So it's about marine law of areas beyond natural jurisdiction. So what are colloquially called the high seas, right? So I'm not super familiar with the agreement, but I was reading a statement by the small island, by the Pacific small island states. And whenever there's something about the environment or about climate change, I like to focus on their perspective, because I think it's often quite telling, because they, on the one hand, they are a marginalized community, they're very small. Going back to what we were discussing later, is that they bear a disproportionate amount of the burden of climate change, and especially when it comes to the sea. But at the same time, and for that reason, they are also very switched on, right, about international law, about what they can gain or what they stand to lose from different currents of international law. So their statement about the BBNJ has overall been fairly positive. So I do think that treaties are slowly going, at least in the environmental field. I don't know about other fields like private law or trade law, for example, but in the environmental field, I think treaties are slowly going in the direction of being more inclusive and ascribing more responsibility to countries which have historically caused the greatest share of environmental damage, both in terms of emissions and general environmental damage to biodiversity and so on. Just two more quick points. So because they are so connected to the theme of this conference, the BBNJ deals with marine genetic resources, including the fair and equitable sharing of benefits. So there's a direct link to what we were discussing before, fair and equitable sharing of benefits, right? So ecological justice as applied to marine genetic resources. So like fishing or seaweed or plastic pollution and things like that. And finally, environmental impact assessment. So the BBNJ has more detailed guidelines about how environmental impact assessments should be conducted. And that, I think, is also a step in the right direction. And it also kind of connects to my research, which, as I was saying, is about ensuring that the true value of nature is captured in economic evaluations, right? So ensuring that not just the market value, but also kind of intrinsic values or non-use values of nature and natural resources are captured. And yeah, so environmental impact assessments, I do think, are also slowly getting better at capturing these other kinds of values and not just focusing on a very narrow conception of economic value when it comes to quantifying the costs and benefits of environmental resources. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for the response, Royan. I hope the response for all the speakers have answering your questions. So it's finally, we come to the end of the first plenary sessions. So I just want to have a short closing statement that we are living under the unequal global world in which unjust experience are more likely experienced by all of the creatures living in the world. So in order to have a future, not only sustain, but a future, we don't actually have any other choice than change our paradigm on how perceiving ourselves as well as how we perceive the nature as well as the environment. If not, then not the environment, but us humans will be extinct. So it's really necessary for us to think how the paradigm on perceiving the environment should be shifted. I think that's all for the first plenary sessions, and I will give back the opportunity for the MC for the next agenda.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Santika. Before leaving the stage, we would like to invite Mrs. Daliana to hand over the souvenir that has been prepared by the committee for the moderator and also for both of the speakers. Okay, thank you very much for our moderator and all of our speakers for the plenary one session. Moving on,
Now, since we have finished the plenary season 1, we have finally come to an end of the opening ceremony season.
After this, we will have a lunch break, and it'll be continued with the parallel session 2 that will be held in every of the assigned rooms by the committee. But before that, for the lunch break, For conveners, speakers, and guests, we would like to invite you to have lunch with us on the building 3 on the second floor, because the committee has prepared a buffet for all of the conveners, speakers, and all of our guests. As for our participants, the committee has prepared lunch in front of this building. So after we close this event, you guys, you can come and collect your lunch in front of this room.
Have a great lunch. My name is Ernesto.
And my name is Sarah. And we, as the Master of Ceremony, would like to say thank you to all participants, and we'll see you in the next session. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Shalom, Om Santi Santi Om, Namo Buddhaya, greetings of virtue.